Okay, welcome to the Under 11s coaching webinar, where we're moving up from under 10s to under 11s. Hopefully you can see the screen that I have shared. And the idea is that I'm just going to hammer through some ideas, and then we'll pick up some questions at the end. Please feel free to maybe jot stuff down in the chat box, and I'll pick it up when we come to it at the time. So for those who don't know, I've been coaching, well, it's a bit scary when I did work this out, about 30 years now. And my connection to under 11s, well, apart from the fact that I coached my son through from under 6s through to under 16s, I was able to be part of the WRU when they were building and rolling out their new rules of play, and then got quite heavily involved in the new rules of play rollout into private schools when that came out. So been talking about and chatting to coaches about under 11s rugby for a very long time, and doesn't mean I know all the answers, but I've heard quite a few of the questions, and my idea tonight really is to talk about some of the things that were going to be slightly new for you, create some or offer some different ways of approaching the coaching, and hopefully giving you some energy and some ideas on top of the energy and ideas you've probably got already. Now, nothing is absolute here. There's nothing which you must do. So I think the idea really is to think, will this work for me? And some of you will be running big teams with 3-4 teams. Perhaps some of you will be happy to get a team out on the weekend, and hopefully we'll be able to offer things which will work with what you've got and fit into the skills you have and the team you have. So as I said, we'll go new laws first. Talk about some of the areas which I think are worth spending a little bit more time on in terms of the skills. Now, under 11s does need some tactical approach, but as you can probably guess, we're still a long way away from the big picture game. So we need to think about some of the tactical situations without necessarily building a massive tactical map. And finally, touch on a few points around how you work with 10-year-olds over a year. I think the first thing we need to do is to understand what under 11s rugby really looks like. And it is quite a change over the year, because if you think of it in percentage terms, in terms of their growth, a year older is quite a significant step forward for these players. They're also getting a bit more athletic, and they're beginning to get a bit more of an understanding of the game. However, you're going to be having players who are starting rugby for the first time. They may be dipping in and dipping out. So what does the game look like at the end of the season? Now, I think that we probably need to go back and start to build in blocks. And that's why I talk about a season momentum. And think probably first game. So your first real game won't be for at least probably 5, 6, 7 weeks away. So what does our game need to look like by our first game? Then the next block is up to half term, then to Christmas, then to the Feb half term, and then into the sort of festival period, depending on how you what you do at the end of the season. And what I mean by that is that you say, right, by the first game, these are the little things that we want to tick off. Now, I'm suggesting with under 11s, and we're going to do a little bit more detail on it, is that you're looking at skills, and you're looking at 1 or 2 particular skills. So the best way to split up is 1 attack and 1 defense skill. Now, attack could be something around catch and pass. Now, I'm not saying that you ignore everything else, but you're saying by the first game, it would be great if more times than not, we are catching in this particular way. So the players have got a little bit of a target. You've got a little bit of target for them to get to. And in defense, well, they're into their third year of tackling. Now, we're not looking at 100% tackle rate, but we are looking for maybe one skill within the tackling. So it could be that you want to get, say, a better grip. Now, I'm not saying that every single player, and we'll focus on the skills. I'm not saying every player is going to be getting their grip right in the tackle, but you can see an improvement. So when you are assessing the games, when you're talking to the players at half time or at the end of the game, saying, I've really enjoyed the game, we've done some really good things, and we've been talking a lot about grip, or they might say, what have we been talking about grip, will be a bit better, and they might say yes, and that will be the focus. Now, as I said, there's loads of other things involved, and that's why I think winning matters. Now, winning matters because we're playing a game. We're not going onto the field to lose a match, but we're not going on to win at all costs. We're going on to look to improve. Now, the scoreline helps us understand where that improvement might be coming. It doesn't mean that we're aiming to win every single game. If we win a game, that's a bonus. It is, have we scored more tries than maybe last week? Have we scored more tries against a team that we normally struggle against? Have we, in order to score those tries, have we done the things that we might have set out? Has our catch been better, for instance? Has our grip been better? Later on in the season, have we been more effective at, say, ball placement? Why do we focus on these things? Because if we catch better, we can score more tries, and it helps us to potentially win games. It is, though, more about the player development in terms of, yeah, I can catch better, but why does that matter? I can make a better grip in the tackle. I can get better footwork in the tackle. I can connect a bit better with the person on the inside. I can use better ball placement. So that's the player development. I've improved. I've had a win through that. And then in terms of team development, you almost, and you have to be quite careful, you are asking them what does winning look like? I pretty much guess that most of them will be saying, well, we score more tries than the other team. And you say, that's one way. What are other ways that we can win the game? Now, this is not a 1 hour session at the start of the season, because they will be switching off right from the start. They think, oh God, there's all chat. We just want to play a game. Of course you want to play a game, but let's just bring it in little bits and pieces. Okay, this game is about, we want to score more tries, but what other things can we win in this game? So winning does matter because it means we're improving. It also means that sometimes we didn't win. We didn't improve our catch. We didn't improve our grip. Okay, so what can we do differently? Now, this needs to be in little amounts. When you're with 14s and 15s, you'll be doing this more. You're introducing this idea of just challenging you a little bit. Not too much. It's not the most important thing. Have we done a little bit of improvement? But anyone who's been in education or has studied education will know that in terms of improvement, so if we say this is progress here, and this is time, a player's journey looks a bit like this. I hope it's on a generally upward trend, but there are lots of reasons why things won't work, and we've just got to help them get through those troughs. Now, I expect that all of you have been focusing or thinking about the new laws for next year already, and let's just pick out the key parts. An extra player doesn't really matter. The wider pitch, again, I don't think it matters that much. The key things here are technically we need to look at the strike, kicking, and I'll come to that in a moment, and we've got an extra player in the contact area. Now, actually, this makes things a lot easier, because I don't know what it's like for you refereeing under 10s, but having just one player in is always a little bit of a refereeing nightmare, because players, are they in, are they out, are they making a difference, are they does it actually have a material effect on the game? But we'll come back to that in a moment. So let's think about the strikes. So we're going to have to think a bit more about scrums, and in order to strike the ball, whereas before the players were probably get away with folding in, they need to have a better profile in order to allow the hooker to strike and win the ball. So we're going to come back to that in a moment when we look at the tactics and the kicking. So they're allowed to kick. They're not allowed to kick, or they're not allowed to fly hack, which means if the ball's on the ground, they're not allowed to kick it forward. And that's there so that when a player drops the ball, there's not lots of players hacking the ball around, which is regarded as dangerous. If a player, so here's my first effort at a drawing here, if a player kicks the ball in the air and an opposition player catches it, they can, if they want, they can shout mark. They can do this anywhere on the pitch. And if they shout mark, they get the scrum. In my experience, I've never seen it happen apart from one time. And that one time was, I was helping coach at St. Paul's School in Barnes. And if anyone knows the kids at what used to be called College Court, but the prep school, they're very, very bright. And of course, they think they're very clever. And a kid calls mark. And it's brilliant. I mean, he's caught the ball on the floor, he's called mark. He's 1 meter from the opposition try line. All he had to do was catch it and put it down. But he did call mark, 5 meter scrum, great. So they can call mark. If they drop the ball and it goes forward, it is not a knock on. It is a scrum to this team's, the team who dropped the ball. So what this means is that there is reward for kicking because you get some territorial distance, but there's reward for players going for the ball. And if they drop the ball, then it's a scrum. If they drop the ball and the ball goes back, and then they pick up the ball and run, if they don't get past where they got to, then they can have a scrum where they drop the ball. So you've got some kicking options available. Catching the ball, kicking the ball, I think will be a bit random. We'll talk a bit about that. And again, I don't see many players catching the ball. It might be something which happens in your game. 2-player contact we'll talk about in the skills. Right, skills focus. I think the new tackle laws won't make much difference for under 10s, under 11s, because you're coaching to tackle much lower anyway. So your skills focus should always be tackling every week. You should be working on tackling every week. You should be quite exact technically in terms of getting the head in the right position. And we'll talk in training about positivity. And in terms of skills, what you should start to look at is that when a player's coming in to make a tackle, for you, is you need to look at this angle here on the front foot. If this player here, you notice there's shin there, if that shin is facing forwards and the knee is moving towards the ground, that is going to promote a low tackle. Now, we used to say, get your foot in close in this sort of ring here. Well, the closer the foot in is, the more difficult it is to make a low tackle. So actually, we're trying to get the knee to go forward to make the tackle. So that's just a little neat piece of technical help for you to see, are the players moving their shin forward, angling it forward to make the tackle. Now, with the scrum focus, and I mean, there's loads obviously on tackle, but there is, so you need to be focusing on the tackle. And on the site, obviously, we've got lots of stuff on tackle. Scrum focus, this is when you need to get players, all players, and I mean every single player in your team should be working every week for maybe a couple of minutes at least, just on a scrum profile. you need to have as many players in your squad able to scrummage. Doesn't mean they're going to scrummage in the game. Obviously, the rule is that the nearest 3 need to scrum. How often that actually happens, I don't know, but every player needs to be able to scrummage. And that means you're working on the scrum profile all the time, because this allows the hooker to strike. Now, with the hooker, I get the hookers. I'm going to try and illustrate the best I can. So the ball is coming in. So the hooker is here. Here's the hooker. Let's just use this as his head here. He is facing this way. And we're looking down. The ball is coming in here from the scrum half. The hooker needs to think in triangles. So this leg comes out this direction here, right leg out, and then back like that. So they think in triangles. That helps the hooker being able to strike the ball. Now, the thing is that as soon as they struck the ball, the game is game on when the 9 touches it. So as soon as that 9's put the ball in, they should be in position to go and get the ball. So I'm going to just do this now rather than move on the tactical thing. Here's your scrum. 3 players, 9 puts the ball in and then goes round here. I would put your first receiver, let's put 10 because that's what we would say the flyer, first receiver right behind the scrum, because you just don't know whether it's going to come left or right out of it, and it makes it much easier. So put the 10 behind the scrum as a general rule to allow you to get that ball away. Contact focus. Because the players are younger, they don't have such strong cores. You still have to work on ball placement as your number 1 contact focus after the tackle. And I kind of come back to a little bit more on contact focus. So ball placement, and anyone who's been on any of the attacking Rugby Made Simple courses will know that the preferred 95% ball placement is the jackknife ball placement, not the long present. And there's a couple of reasons for that. The long present has some advantages because you get the ball. That looks more like a bike there. Sorry, long present. There's the body, and there's the head, and there's the ball going back. The long present has an advantage that it's much further away from the opposition, but it takes a long time for this player to get there, and it makes no difference to the gate. It makes no difference to the gate because, and I'm going to try and draw this in the best possible way. So here is the player on the ground. There's their head, there's their body, there's their legs placing the ball back, and there's this is the long present. Now, technically, I'm going to try and use colors. That's the width of the gate there. That's the width of the gate there. But the reality is the referee sees this as the width of the gate, because any player who arrives legally through here and then turns their hips to reach for the ball looks like they're coming from the side. So I wouldn't worry about the width of the gate. Use the jackknife ball presentation as your number 1 ball placement, but focus on what we call you wouldn't say this word to them, contact hierarchy, which means pass the ball pass before contact. That's your number 1. You want to try and do that. Ball passed in contact. So if you can offload the ball in contact, that's great. The next one is be ball tough, which means that you secure the ball and you work hard to get to ground. And then if you can pop the ball off the ground, that would be the next part of that. And then finally, great ball placement. What's the next player do when they arrive? Well, if you've got 2 players, then this would be my suggestion. Here is that's the breakdown. That's the player passing the ball back. The first arriving player, they should go past the ball. The second arriving player should be in a position over the ball, but not what we might call sealing off. They should be here. in a positive position, hands off the player on the ground, ready to meet the player coming forward. And the reason for that is, if you want to play a fast game, don't seal off. If you want to play a slow game, seal off. I'm not saying that I'm not going to go into the debate on what is sealing off exactly and the pros and cons. My suggestion is, your challenge is that if you can't get the ball off the ground straight away, the first player blasts over the ball. The second player gets over the player ready to come forward in this sort of scrum profile position, not with their hands on the floor. Going to come to handling in a moment. Kicking. Well, because kicking is part of the game now, some of your games in training should have kicking. You may have all of your games, but some of your games should have kicking. And I will talk about that when we look at the training in a moment. Handling focus. I wouldn't worry too much about 2v1 training. Not because it's not important, because it's actually still very hard for them to picture 2v1s. I would focus on passing rate. And that means getting as many passes in as you can. Now, tactically, that might not make much sense. So there's your line, there's the defense there, and you pass, pass, and pass. And by the time that pass gets to this end player, yeah, the defense has drifted across. Yeah, these players, these attacking players could have been more efficient. But the key thing is that you've created a different problem. And this player and more players have got touches on the ball. And I think this is important because this is developmental. Eventually, your team will be able to technically fix these players here. Pass more, better passing rate will create a faster game. It will move your players around, and eventually, in time, they will become better players. So encourage passing rate. So don't do too many 2v1s. Work on maybe 5v2s where you're trying to get the ball to the end player. So tactical focus. Playoff scrum, I said that, so if we're playing this way, I would put your first receiver behind. I wouldn't do too much in terms of moves. I would just get the ball away from the scrum, 2 or 3 passes. That could be an ambition. This could be in your blocks by half term. It would be great from the scrum if the third receiver got the ball. That would be a really good target for us. Can we do that? Still need to think about plays off free pass. So here's a little idea for this. I would letter all my players AA, BB, CC, DD. So AA, BB, CC, DD. And that would mean that the setup would be this. From every kickoff, A and A would be the free pass to the first player. So we don't have arguments. It's only an A, and then we have B, B, C, C, D, D. I think there's an E in there. So A and A are the free passes. B and B are the next receivers, C and C, and that's every setup from a free pass. So that means that you remove that sort of argument that you have with the players over who's taking it. And then after, say, 3 or 4 minutes, we'll swap some of the letters around. Now, of course, this takes a bit of management. Even adults get confused by changing letters. So you're just going to have to work it through. But some weeks, some players are not going to have a chance at AA. But the week after, they'll be AA. So they'll have a good 3 or 4 minutes of the free pass. So this sort of leads us into attack strategy. And your attack strategy, it shouldn't be about plays. Your attack strategy should be about intention. And this is why I'm talking, this is what I would be saying is like by half term, Let's see if we can get 4 passes away from a breakdown. Doesn't mean that we do it every single time, but that would be what a wonderful intention that is, to move that ball 4 passes and give ourselves a different problem. Because I think that the main problem with, even up to under 16s, I see this in under 16s club rugby, is that ruck here, 9 here, big forward here, bang. And that is the attack strategy all the way. And this forward here, yeah, they love running with the ball. Of course they love running with the ball. Everybody loves running with the ball. But the trouble is that this forward is always running with the ball. So let's have a bit of intention to move the ball. And this is where we can use a bit of Mark Eller. So I'm assuming everyone here, because you've got younger kids, you won't probably have heard of Mark Eller, but Mark Eller was one of the great Australian backs of all time, 70s and 80s player. And he said that if I touch the ball once, we may score. Once, we may score. If I touch the ball twice, we score. If I touch the ball 3 times, I score. So let's get the players thinking, I want to get 2 touches on the ball. It was a big saying at the Ospreys. Sean Holly used to say, look to get your second touch, look to be involved. Don't just pass the ball and give up. Let's try and get that second touch. Kicking strategy. Again, you're not coming up with some grand plan to kick, but it's worth giving the players a thought that if we are, and you do have 22s now in the game, if we're in our 22 and we have a scrum, should we kick it? Now, I'm not saying you should, but it gives the players a chance to think about it before they play the game. It's no point in them running on the pitch, damn your scrum, and some coach saying, kick this ball, because you know what's going to happen is they'll panic. So think about it, or get them to think about it beforehand. As you can see, under 11s, I could go on for ages with it. I just absolutely love it. It's a really interesting time for these players when they are in a really interesting transition stage in their rugby, and as coaches as well. We're moving away from perhaps just developing sports people in a sports environment and thinking far more rugby. So shape of training. Every session you should do some profiles. It might be the warm-up, your profile work. Every session, every other session, if not every session, you should be doing perhaps some very gentle 2v2 scrums or 3v3 scrums. Get every player used to playing in there. The players will move around as time goes on. 1 or 2 players will be clearly never going to play in the pack in a month of Sundays, but it is amazing how many players do end up playing the pack. We're recording this a couple of days before England play, and on the bench and in the team are a couple of players who were playing in the back row at under 18s and under 16s, and now playing the front row for England. So we're not looking at developing future England stars here, but we're giving players opportunities to play out of position. The next thing is that skills are very important, but they can't become the thing. So you can't say, right, we're going to work on skills for this training session, because it would be criminal to spend all your time on skills when really you want to be playing. So where does skills fit into this? You need to be, say, working on these blocks. Right, we're going to work on, say, in tackle, up to the first game, we're going to focus on 3 things. We're going to focus week 1 grip, week 2, say, footwork, and week 3 leg drive. So let's say that's what we're going to do. Week 1 grip, spend more time thinking about grip. Week 2 footwork, week 3 leg drive, and then we're going to come back and go grip, footwork, leg drive. That means you're just going to spend 5 minutes on this, not a 10-15 minute exercise on tackling. Right, we're just going to focus a little bit on grip. You can do it through games. I've got some games on the site we can do it through games. But let's think, at the end of the session, what were we doing in tackle? Hopefully most of them will say grip. Come back to it in a couple of weeks. What do we do in grip? And then then we're working on footwork and leg drive. So block up to, and then the first game, let's see how we get on with grip. So skills, mix the skills around. For anyone who's fascinated by learning and how learning works, you want to interleave skills. So your session should be, say, you could do 5 minutes tackle, 5 minutes handling, 5 minutes contact, have a game. The game doesn't have to have any of these elements in it. In fact, probably don't worry about having any of these elements in the game. It doesn't matter. The game is for other reasons. And then go back and do the same things again. 5 minutes tackle, 5 minutes handling, 5 minutes contact. That is a really powerful way to improve learning. Now, they're not there because you are trying to get them through exams and trying to hammer in some learning, but this is an effective way of learning. Do it in rhythm with your team as long as they feel that the energy is helping them enjoy it. It might be you just do 2 of those. Otherwise, it's too much. And the main thing is that they're coming to play. They're coming to rugby to play. Now, the play could start in the warm-up with a warm-up game. Now, warm-ups is probably the only time I would do anything which looks non-rugby. And rarely I would do that now. So all play should generally have the what I call the internal logic, as much as the internal logic as you can of the game. So the internal logic is that you score on a try line which is in front of you. It's nowhere else. It's not to the side. It's not a circle. It looks like that. That's what the game should look like. You run forwards. You can run sideways and backwards. Players do. That doesn't matter. But you pass backwards. So let's pass backwards. Let's do majority of our work is pass backwards, because that's the hardest thing. A player running up the pitch here with a ball. Yes, they can see the defenders in front of them, but their teammates are behind them. And this is a real challenge. So let's do as much of this as possible. Let's create these challenges with pass backwards and use a rugby ball. 95% of the time, use a rugby ball. Perhaps a slightly different shape rugby ball, softer ball, slightly bigger ball, maybe one with a less grip, one which is really grippy. But rugby ball, let's get them using rugby ball 95% of the time, because they need to get used to the shape of it. It is different. It is different to catch. It's different to pass. That's what they're going to be doing. So play as much as you can. In the warm-up will probably be less like the game, but finish every session as much as you can, depending on the surface you've got, with a game which looks like the game or a slice of the game. If you've got lots of players, you might play a full-on game. If you haven't got enough players, you might play 5 versus 4, or you might play 6 versus 3. You can set lots of different problems within that. And how do you start the game? We start the game like you would in a normal game. You just don't throw them the ball. You say, right, here is a pitch. We're going to start with a scrum here. That's how we're going to start this game. That's because that's how it looks like. Or we're going to start with a free pass here. Let's look at what is realistic in terms of a game of rugby, because they've come to training to play rugby. Now, it's not win at all costs. It's not just about becoming super duper players. It's about them building themselves more confident, a better person, and more socialized. And that's all part of the craft you're coaching. Let's try and use rugby as the conduit, as the vehicle. So for me, plan your season in blocks. Don't look at the whole picture. Look at little bits of the picture and see if you can get success from that. probably I didn't make much of it, but well, I did. I said that you should finish as much as possible with a game with contact in it. They just got to get used to it. Now, you don't have to have a full pitch on. I mean, really, even adult rugby, they love having a game, but if you can make it on a tiny pitch, they love it, because there's not the big player having a good big run up as a smaller player. Just another quick point on that is that gang tackling is a really good exercise, probably almost more so than 1v1 tackling. I'm going to use this year, I'm going to work a lot more on 3v3s or 2v3s in tackling scenarios, because these players have got to make more decisions. Encourage a lot more passing. Yes, tactically, if we've got a defense like this, we want to fix the defense if we are happy with the term fix. And if we just pass and pass and pass, these defenders will probably drift out. I'm not too worried about that. If we can get these players to be square and fixed, brilliant. Let's get more passes, because it democratizes the game. More players, more touches, more engagement, more part of the game. And then from a team management point of view, rotate equally. Every player has an equal chance to play the game. Obviously, a new player coming in takes different management. You'll need to introduce them. A lovely tip I picked up yesterday: new player, first game, they've arrived day one, and you've got a game on Sunday. You're obviously not going to play them, but they turn up and they warm up with the team. So they do everything but play the game. So they're involved in every single aspect. So when they are actually, right, Johnny, this is your first game coming up, they've played the warm-up already. So they get used to being part of the team. And I just say, as I say, rotate on the pitch as much as possible. And the main reason for me is it just removes any parental pressure, because everyone gets pretty much equal time. And your best player will play as much as your worst player, and it doesn't matter. And that's why when I say winning matters, it doesn't matter what the scoreline is, because everyone's played a game. So it gives you a bit of an excuse, of course, because you say, well, everyone played. It doesn't matter whether we won or lost, but we won because as a coaching group, everyone got on the pitch and everyone was able to do this. Everyone was able to try that. Okay, there's so many things I could add into that, but that was just a sort of, well, I've gone over a bit in terms of time. But there we are. That's quite a lot in there. So I've got a couple of questions up on the screen already. So James said, is the recording going to be available afterwards? Yes. Lizzie and O'Donnell says, interesting to the U11s, we have front, second row scrum, no kicking, 5-player and go throw liner. So yeah, in Ireland, so in England, no line outs until under 14s. And you can have as many or as few in the line out as you want, like normal rules. Yeah, the kicking, I'm not sure if under 11s is the time to start kicking, but why not? And that's why I say in training games, yeah, James, I'll come with the drop kick in a moment. That's a good question. In training games, I allow kicking just so the players can try it out. But so what I do in the training games for the kicking is I'm going to say, let's say it's a 9v9 for the sake of an example. I'm going to say in this 9, player A and player B are the only ones allowed to kick. And what that does is this: it makes these players start to think about, when are my opportunities to kick? They start to strategize. They can start to maybe get themselves into position. Otherwise, everything is a panic kick. So you say, player A, player B, you're the 2 players who are allowed to kick on this side, and on this side, it will be player 1 and player 2. So that's how I introduce kicking into that. I also do, I also say to this, because I'm going to nominate a clearing passer, which would be what we'd otherwise called a 9, a clearing passer. So this player is, we got one player is always the clearing passer and one player is always the first receiver. So we mix around the first receivers. And with the first receivers, we can start to bring in this sort of Mark Ella, see if you can get a second touch on the ball. See if you can get a second touch. So that's where I would do on the kicking and the training. Yeah, so Scotland and England and Wales they're just slightly out of kilter, but I think the principles remain the same, that you are trying to get them to play as much as possible and really want to try and build the passing rate as much as you can and give them this idea that they want to try and move the ball quickly away from contact. This idea that I see a lot of teams will get the first arriving player to come in and seal off is, for me, I just don't think it's a positive way of playing the game. So James says, how do you coach the drop kick to start? Well, it's a really difficult skill, number one. How do I do it? Well, the first thing is it's a lot about the drop, and players don't know how to drop the ball. So what I do is I try and get as much as possible. I mean, not everyone can drop kick. I mean, even at the adult game, you'll see some really strange efforts. So get the player to be really low down and just drop the ball just below their knee, so they get used to the ball bouncing up. And it's got to sort of, if they sort of drop it so it's leaning towards them, it tends to bounce back into their foot, and then that's when they kick. So that was probably my number one thing, is work on the drop first. But there's a lot more to it. So get the drop first, and then things come from it. And the lower that they can drop, the less chance of mistakes. And I can tell you that I'm with the University of Bristol women's team, working mostly with the seconds and thirds. A lot of these girls have never kicked a ball before, let alone dropping the ball, doing drop kicks. And it is something that you can introduce to them in training, but really they learn to kick and become better kickers away from training, pretty much like a 9 pass. You start 9s away from training. You start them in training with giving them some ways to do it, ways to pass, but they need to go away and they need to be passing as much as possible away from training. That's just the simple reality. You just don't have time to get the reps in or the efforts in. So Jamie's asking, do I support streaming at this age? And for me, the answer is no. You can do it. Yeah, James, I'll come back to the practice later. You probably would do it if you were in a big school. But in club rugby, I would avoid it. And there's lots of reasons for that. First of all, bad blood. If you're on the edge of the A and the B squads, you think you should be in the A squad, or you've just about made it into the A squad, and someone will say, well, why the hell are you in the A squad? It just causes all sorts of trouble. The more that you can mix at this age, the better. The challenge, of course, is, yes, the challenge is around challenging the strong players. So, Jamie, this is not for now, because this is a big topic and I want to do it justice. So let's put that one on the back burner, but we will come back to that, and I will definitely do something. I've got some things on the site, but we will do one around streaming. And exactly what you say, how do I challenge the good players? How do I make sure that the weaker players don't become disillusioned, disheartened? And there's a great article on the site from Tom Brocklebank, which he did about 3 or 4 weeks ago. So I will share that with you. But come back to me. Let's talk about it. Let's see how it works. It is very situational as well. From James's point of view, yeah. you may have heard of the sort of 10,000 hours rule, and that is one of these sort of slightly mythical figures. There's no such thing as a 10,000 hours rule, but certainly the more players have what we might technically call deliberate practice. Deliberate, is that how you spell it? Looks roughly right. Deliberate practice, which is which is focused on what they're trying to do, the better. But really, players learn through struggle. Something where it is not easy, it is a little bit difficult, or a little bit more difficult than they're used to. And that's how we've got to do. So practice is, first of all, maybe rehearsal, just get a bit of confidence. So tackling, let's just feel confident. That's not learning, that's rehearsing and just becoming a bit more confident. Yes, it is learning in the sense that you're rehearsing and relearning, but new learning comes from struggling. And I think that we have to be very careful with this word. And there's a myth. We do not want to train in chaos. We want to train where the players are struggling, but not panicking. Panicking? That looks about how you spell panicking. Now, if it's chaotic, you don't learn in chaos because there's too many things going. Your brain is absolutely blowing gaskets all over the place. But if it's just a bit too hard for you, then you're going to say, can I make that? Can I? Yeah, or no, yeah, or just nearly. And it's the nearlies which make the learning happen, not the, oh, I'm never going to get this. So when you play your very first game, lots happens. It's just everything's happening all at once. So let's just reduce the chaos. Let's reduce it into first game. If you're new to tackling and you can get yourself close to make a tackle, or you can get a grip, even if you don't complete the tackle. Brilliant. I can't quite get the grip. Can't quite. That's fine. Can't quite. Almost. Can't quite. If you miss 30 tackles and no grip, then it's too much chaos. Too many things going on. So let's reduce the load for the players. It's not going to be fun if they're overloaded. It's going to be fun when they're making some progress. They can see progress, but it still means they make mistakes. And I think you can tell the players or ask the players before a game, and I think this is really powerful. It's what I've been doing a lot this year, more so than I've ever done, is ask the players before a game. Well, we're going to do we're going to play a game, and these are going to be the rules. What sort of mistakes do you think might happen? And they might say, well, you're asking us to make some kicks. Oh, I reckon that we won't kick the ball very far. I think that's the mistake we'll make. Or I think that we will drop the high ball. And I will say, fine, I think this is going to happen. So if it happens, don't worry, as long as you've understand that. So when they make that mistake, they don't go, oh, I've made that terrible mistake. They don't fall around or get disappointed. It is an acceptable mistake to them. And they can identify, or you can identify it for them. So we're going to do a 4v2. We've never done a 4v2 before. So I think what might happen is I think the third pass will be a really difficult pass. So if we can make that pass and it gets to the third player, that'd be brilliant. If they drop it, at least we've made the pass. So I'm not too worried about that. But let's try. Let's see if we can get there. Oh, we dropped it. That's fine. We understand that. We know that's where the struggle is. So that's where I would go with that. So Jamie's asked another question. When scheduling season, what is the ideal match to training session? We only play one day a week, difficult match to training session. So I'm just trying to work out, Jamie, can you just tell me a little bit more about what that means? I'm not certain what you mean by that. Do you want to just come off the mute? And anyone else wants to jump in with some questions in the meantime?
Thank you. It's Jamie. So a match against another team. So we've got lots of teams near us, all wanting matches every Sunday.
Yeah.
And so end up scheduling far too many matches and never have a training session.
Yeah, well, I think that you definitely want to have matches. That's because that's great fun. But you don't want to have you got it right. You got once you have too many, it's too much. You want to. I think. Well, actually, Lizzie's saying one every 3 weeks. I think one every 2-3 weeks is absolutely fine. And I think also because you give your players a lot more chances. I mean, internal matches are pretty good, and then when you can have an external match, you've got a chance to test yourself. So I think 1 day a week is fine at under 11s. I think if you're training twice a week at club level, that's probably too much. And the reason why I think that's the case is that from a player's point of view, it can start becoming something they're not looking forward to. Oh no, it's Tuesday. We got training again. No, I'm looking forward to for training. And another thing, which I think is a really brave thing to do. I'll come to that one. James did in a moment. A really brave thing to do is actually have every maybe 6 or 7 weeks have a week off, because you won't lose players because you have a week off at this age. If you have 4 weeks off, they'll go off and do something else. But that chance to say, oh, we've got to find the kit, it's great for the players and for the parents. And one of the things I remember making the change after resisting it for a long time is don't play on Mothering Sunday. When I eventually got myself over the line, I thought to myself, why didn't I make this decision years ago? So have a couple of Mothering Sundays, because it's not the mothering part, it's the whole family part. Just sometimes needs a break. Would you train? I don't think you would train a week before a match, because you're not preparing for matches. You're never preparing for matches. Matches are a chance to test learning, to see where you are, but also to help the players grow as people within slightly different pressurized situations, in unusual situations. It's more about, can I get enough game time for my players? And I think that's the challenge. So going back to Jamie's point, if you've say got, and if you're suggesting you've got streaming, you've got more than one side, then it might be that one side plays 1 week and the other side trains. So that might be a time being put off by Jonathan saying one of our players put a mother in hospital on Mother's Day. So that is a story to remember and laugh at in 10 years' time, perhaps at the wedding, but not on the day after. So take the pressure off match day as an event, by saying, right, we've got to get ready for the match. It's not, the match is for me, it's a test for you of learning. It's an assessment of learning for you. Have the players moved on? Is my training helping the players become more skillful, more team orientated? Challenging myself with my spelling here. And better people. And that's what a match does, because it takes you away from your environment. You're slightly uncomfortable. So we've been working on this for the last 4 weeks. Have we been successful? Is our training doing what we should be doing? And if the answer is no, we might just need to change our training. The stuff I've been listening to recently is that teaching in the classroom, you've got, say, these number of weeks. this week here, you either use for your extension or you use to relearn. So if you think you've nailed everything by week 5, things are going well, the players are doing the things you want, then you extend them. We're going to do a little bit more. We're going to put a little bit more pressure. We add another element into this. If they're not, well, let's just relearn it. Let's just become a bit better at it. At the end of the season, you're not creating the complete player. I mean, anyone who's been watching the internationals and maybe with a Welsh or English shirt on will be thinking, some of these players can't do some of the things that I want my under 11s to do, let alone do them for England. So let's go back and relearn. It doesn't have to be boring, because we're not saying, oh, we've got to go back and practice this. It's right, we're going to do this and we're just going to get a bit better. That's fantastic, you've done this bit better. So that's where I go with that. So just yes, so I like, yeah, what Lizzie's saying there is definitely some sides and some coaches brilliant to work with, and I think that's the way the wins come. You play the game, and at the end of it you can just say, yeah, I really like the way that you guys were passing the ball in front, that we better to do that, or I love the fact that everybody put themselves forward to play in the scrum, because when you blow the whistle for a knock on, it's that sort of petri dish effect of there's the scrum, and all the lumps who like scrummaging rush in and all the backs rush out, and then you say, right, nearest 3 players, it turns out to be the 3 most likely to play scrummaging scrum for forever. But yeah, that's what I would suggest. And I think that I think Ireland, the blitzes do that really well, but I think we can all do it, and it just takes a good conversation. However, as you well know, not every coach is developmentally thinking about their team. It's a lot about them and them winning, and yeah, we're probably going to take it on the chin. Sometimes we're going to play against a side who's not going to be in that way. But Lizzie Stroke Donald, that's great. I mean, definitely I would try and do that as much as possible. I'm not going away, so if anyone wants to ask any more questions or tap anything more in, or just come off mute, then please do, or put their hand up. Then I'm really happy to add color to some of these things. Obviously, differentiation is noted down as something that I will look at in more detail and do more justice to at a different time.
Sorry, Dan, something from our side, just I'm scribbling my notes there. So I was sort of thinking there, the one thing you want to learn, say, for the first term of the season. So as a coaching group, we've already decided that what we try to get is a bit more aggression into the tackle. And sort of, I suppose, this balancing act as you try to, teach the perfect tackle technique and try to make tackling an art. But there's also the risk that you've actually you frighten the kids into the idea of you're trying to teach them then to do something that goes against their natural being. And it's not, we don't, like, we try not to use the word hit. As a coaching team, I don't like the idea that you're going in to hit someone. And it's back to the tackle, but just trying to get them sort of, we kind of feel that if we can get a little bit of natural aggression into them, that the technique and the lower technique and making that contact and the tight wrap will become a bit easier. Is there something, or is there drills on the database that we could look at that might help with that?
Yeah, and I'm delighted that you've said that and you've used the word aggression in that, because that's a question which is asked a lot at this age, because some kids, often those who've got brothers or sisters, younger or older, are used to fighting and being aggressive with each other all the time. And certainly I was the eldest of three, and my middle brother was as hard as nails. And I didn't really learn to tackle until probably about in my 20s. So some of that is natural. For me, I think the most important thing is that the word I don't use is safe, because if you think that this is a safe tackle, you might then start thinking there's a dangerous tackle. So it's not, it's the language. You're quite right about the language. So good technique is safe technique. So that's number one. So we just focus on good technique. All our language is on, oh, that was good because, that was good because, that was good because, not because it was safe. It's good because we complete a tackle. It helps us become more successful. And good technique is safe technique. Now, aggression comes naturally to some, but not to a lot. And this is where I think the difference is that you create a confident tackler. So a confident tackler, first of all, is confident they have good technique. And the second thing is that they've been in what I would call struggle situations. I talked about that before, where there is physicality, but they've come out of it thinking, well, that's all right. Now, we can do this in very simple terms by sort of wrestling type games. But we can also do it in, and I've talked about it a little bit earlier, it's sort of like a 3v3 in a very, very small area. Very small because they're gonna struggle a little bit, but they're gonna have other people around them. So they're using good technique. They're in a bit of a struggle, but they're getting used to that physicality. And at the end of it, you can build a confidence. Brilliant, fantastic. Do you know how many tackles you made in there? Do you know how many times you got your head in low there? Do you know? And they say, oh no, that was fantastic. And that starts to build them towards the game. Now, the game which I've found which has really helped them is the what's it called on the site? So it's one that Sean Holly gave me. It's a 4v4 game. I'm putting it on here and I will find it, and it is the players start. I'm going to do it on this screen here. You have 4 or 5 players opposite each other like this. They are and they're in this quite narrow channel like this, and they pass the ball along the line to this player just standing still, and then they pass the ball across to here, and they keep passing the ball along the line around. It goes around here, and they're not that far apart. And then you get them to start walking, mirror each other, walking backwards and forwards. So they're always this distance apart. And at any stage, let's say the ball reaches this player, you say go. And this player here has to beat this player here. Now, they're not that far apart, so he can't run outside this player because that player's in the way. And it's very likely that some form of tackle happens in this area. And then you can get players to come in and perform the sort of the 2-player, well, in obviously in the UK, 2-player ruck. In Ireland, I think it says one player, and then they get that. Now, for some reason, I've got no scientific research insight into this. The kids love this game, and you get a lot more players making tackles because there is not much distance between these players. And obviously you're going to match them up. You don't want your largest player facing your smallest player here. You want to just be a little bit wise about that. But even then, they can start to make those tackles. So that's that Sean Holly exercise. Again, lots of chances to tackle. And you're quite right. If you are aggressive in the tackle, that's not the right word, but that's the right intention. It's amazing how much more successful you are. It's just like in golf, standing on the first tee with your driver, and you don't commit to your shot. then it flies off. Flies off to the right into the trees because you haven't committed to it. And just like in the tackle, it's it's all about having that confidence to get your head in tight. So that's a couple of things on that. I mean, I'm going to do some in a couple of weeks' time. Once the season's in play, we're going to have a tackle webinar, just going through all the tackle bits and pieces and talking about how you can, some of the other ideas around that. So Donald, assuming you are the Donald, I hope that starts you thinking.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, and look, it's not. It's sort of I don't know what other word to use instead of aggression, but ultimately to say it's confidence, really. You know, and it manifests itself in you don't want anyone losing a head. You know.
No, and you can see that in their bodies, and there is no magic button that you can press to make a player naturally aggressive. Now, some players will be more aggressive some days than other days, and certainly in your team you will know players who will probably make 20 tackles because that's why they come to rugby. And there's plenty of clips on YouTube of one player making 5 tackles in one passage of play because they just love tackling. So well, put it this way, eventually I learned to tackle, and so there is hope. I wasn't a very good tackler, but I did get there eventually.
Thank you.
That's okay. So Jamie, you come in another question. I think it was driving hard for progression, more aggression is very competitive. Okay. So Jamie, you wouldn't believe, well, you probably would believe that this is a very common problem. And probably the people who are on here joining us are probably slightly more developmentally driven. So how do you deal with this? Well, it is a gentle, long process of helping the dad see where you want to go as a group. And the thing is that I think it's very easy to do this, and I see this as a problem with some approaches. Let us say this is where we want to go. This is our target in developmentally, and this is where the other coach is. So they're on there. I mean, I could probably draw quite a good. So there is competitive developmental and sort of, I would say probably drills and games. Now, I'm not saying drills are absolutely key. You've got to be doing drills, but if you're drilling the players into being more aggressive, perhaps maybe aggressive. So getting this person to here is, you don't say we've got to be here. You've got to take them in gentle steps. This is the gradual change, a gradual change model. For anyone in business will know that sometimes you can make sudden changes, but here, this is somebody who's not going to be changing their mind over time. So let's take them with easy steps to there. And off the top of my head, you got to think, what is your easiest step to get them towards this being there? And for them, sometimes they might not even be able to make the step. And that's maybe, unfortunately, where sometimes you're going to part ways. But the easiest step is that the club rule is we rotate. Every player gets equal time. Doesn't matter whether you're the best player or the worst player, everyone gets equal time. And I think that either this coach here goes with it and goes this way, or this coach doesn't go with it and they leave. And I think that's the way I probably practically I see it going. And
that's really useful, Dan. Thank you.
Okay, good. And good luck with that.
He's bigger than me.
Even better luck than that. Anyone else want to throw anything in? This has been really interesting. I probably I love under 11s because it's just a really interesting time for the kids, and it's I just coming back to the shape of training here. It seems like I've put this into a sort of a massive learning piece on rugby, and yeah, that's important. But are you enjoying it, and are they enjoying it? Is a key, and I think enjoyment comes from progression. It comes from getting a little bit better at everything. The research says that motivation and achievement are very closely linked. If you have achievement, you tend to be motivated to do something else. Kids who play, or probably some of us who play video games or play games on our phone, we tend to come back to it because we're getting a little bit of success, and a little bit of success motivates us to do a bit more. So you've got to make your environment safe. You've got to make your environment inclusive, and you've got to help every player see where they're making progression. And that's why I talk about right at the top, talk about blocks. Because you're not creating a complete player. You're going to have players. I had this little progression here of a player, and at the same time, another player could be going like this. So you could be. You've got player 1 here and player 2 here, and you're jumping in with each one to say, well done. I mean, Jamie might be talking to his very competitive player about something he's doing very well in recovering and bouncing out from a tackle, whereas another player, it's actually they've made their first steps towards a tackle. That is very tough, and teachers, experienced teachers and coaches will find that tough. However, one thing which I think is really important is that everyone gets the same skills. Everyone is taught the same skills. The difference is the pressure that you put on these skills for some players, and then it's up to them, because they've got to take charge of their own learning. Some of them are going to say, yeah, I'm with it, I'm going for it, and others will be, yeah, it's not my thing, or that's not a point. So everyone gets the same skills. With better players, you put them under more pressure with the skill. With weaker players, you take a little bit of pressure off it. And then it's up to them whether they want to embrace the skill or not. So at the end of it, so if you're testing, say, I mean, it's GCSE day today, and in schools, I know there's some streaming goes on, but in schools, you're graded basically on how much you are willing to learn, how much you're capable of learning, and then obviously there is some pieces around other support. But it's up to you whether you want to take skills on. But differentiate in terms of pressure, don't differentiate in terms of skills. Everybody has access to the same skills most of the time, and that's a pretty good way of seeing differentiation over a season.